famous even right now that when people see it coming, they take a kickback from Timex and we utilize that bunny and says it take a licking and keep on ticking. They place both of them together when really the Energizer Bunny and Timex have only one thing in common. They are both long lasting. And I said Sister Burton gave me something today because as she talked with passion, as she talked with energy, she did not have a screen up to tell us when to clap. But when you're energized, folk don't have to ask you to clap. You ought to already be ready to clap. And I am aware that we don't like change, even though we change every day. And if you don't think we change, go back and look at some of your photos 10 years ago. And we've had some major surgeries without even going to the doctor called hair loss. We've had some dental work that we can smile, and we have 32, but we wasn't born with them. They SIBs, they some I bought. And I don't know, but change seems to be hard, so we have to edit some things. And when we edit things, we can keep things lifting. Some of you, in the midst of worship service at your various churches, because we have changed so much, we find out that time is an Indian giver. What it gives us in our vitality, it takes back in our elder statesmen. And you don't have to name it or claim it. Nobody have never claimed being old. It just happened. If you keep on waking up in the morning, old gonna get you. And I said that because some of us at our various churches, we want to holler, we want to shout, we want to stand, but we have some new friends. And with those new friends, sometimes pain get in one side, and that's the side you normally use, you can't move. So since we have become the people that we used to talk about, you understand the aged saint that say, I can just only wave my hand. But can I share with you, even if you can't wave your hand, you ought to be able to move your head. Because if you have energy, even though it leaves in one spot, it's gained in another spot. So when we look at this Energizer Bunny and talk about him, the Energizing Bunny became a marketing icon. And for that, it was actually a bunny that was actually being energized for a battery. The battery was supposed to display and demonstrate a longevity of life. And if anybody is one day over 35, we ought to realize we're closer to the grave than we are to the cradle. And that's reason enough to have some energy. That we ought to have enough energy that when we walk in the church setting or convention setting, that we're already ready to shout. That nobody ought to have to pump us or prime us to make sure. And since we're about kingdom business with this convention, since we're in a convention setting, since you are dressed up for church, we ought to have enough energy to let somebody outside know that we're going to have church. And then when we leave this setting and go into the halls before we get to the different vendors, they ought to know we've been to church. And then that way nobody have to pump or prime us on our way to Calvary to get happy. Somebody ought to get happy with energy before we get to Calvary. And even in this setting of training and teaching and engaging and energy and being energized, we ought to not act as if we're at the library or in a cemetery. We ought to act as if we're at a stadium where our team have just scored the winning goal. And I don't have to tell us how we act. Some of us, we have to know how to act because some of the places that we like to go makes us have plenty of energy. Wherever your place is, when you get there, you love where you are. So what I found out, energy is a partner that ought to be on the inside. That wherever you are is where you ought to show your energy. Can I do it this way? You can't eat at Golden Corral and pay at Luby's. You have to pay where you eat. And surely, if the Lord has been good to you, you don't wait till he done something else. You ought to shout for what he's already done. And that energy should be a part of us, because energy tells us that we ought to be revitalized. That's why we have revivals. And our president is so high up on energy that it ought to excite us. It ought to electrify us. It ought to make sure it triggers. It ought to supply something on the inside of us, because conventions are still conventions. Conventions are not dead. It's the people in the convention.
Greet you in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. I am Pastor Michael W. Turner. I'm proud pastor of the original Harvest Missionary Baptist Church in the great city of Cleveland and the great state of Ohio. I want to thank the illustrious president, my president, the Reverend Dr. Anthony Sharp, and the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America for choosing us to be the host for the 140th session of this great convention. I'm humbled, I am poised and excited to be the host and to be hosting you. And we are here to serve you. Yes, you're coming to us. You're coming to the greatest location in the nation. And we are so happy and thrilled and excited that you are coming this year, September, the week of Labor Day 2020. It is a week you will never forget. And we are rolling out the red carpet, and I want you to know that every one of you will be our special VIP.
If you don't have no get up with your get on, then you just a letdown. But when you're able to show some energy, when you're able, I can't talk long without my voice elevating. I don't have to preach, but my voice gonna elevate. And my voice gonna elevate because I have a passion and energy for the one I'm working for. And since I enjoy who I'm working for, I can't help but get excited. And then when somebody said, don't take all of that, I have to borrow a line from my brother. You shout up into how good God's been to you and just leave me alone. Because I can shout up into how good he's been to me. Now, I just want to check your energy level right now. If God has been good to you, You ought to be able to make some kind of noise. If he's made a way for you, you ought to make, I shouldn't have to tell you to clap. I shouldn't have to tell you to stand. I shouldn't have to tell you to stomp. If the Lord have energized you because you've been through hell and high water, then somebody ought to have some energy. Well, I'm good at finding some characters. I don't know about you. I'm a Western fanatic. And I love Westerns. I mean the real Westerns, not this stuff they put together now, but I mean real Westerns. I like Have Gun Will Travel. I like High Chaparral and Wagon Train, and I like them Cartwright boys on Bonanza, and I like the way Victoria lead them Barclays, and I like the Rifleman. I even know how many times he shoot that gun in the prelude. I like Marcia Diller with Gunsmoke. I like 40 Guns at Apache Pass with Artie Murphy. I like True Grit and the Sons of Katie Elder. I like Westerns. Westerns excite me. I think that's why I pack so many, because I like them. I like Westerns. But surely there's some characters in the Bible that showed us some energy. And they're just like us because they went through something. Moses had some energy. He made some excuses. He messed up. And can I stop right there and tell us all of us have messed up? There's some bad in the worst of us, and there's some bad in the best of us. But all of us are used to be something. And since we're all some used to be's, that's another reason for us to energize right now. Because if God can look back at our rascalities and our frailties and still use us in his service, don't be like the old saint that told me, Pastor Miller, well, now that ain't what she said. I thought she was going to say Reverend because I was preaching. I'd been preaching about 5 years. She called me by my nickname. She say Peel. That knocked my little ego down. And she said, now, I heard you preaching, boy. You still preaching? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, God had to reach the bottom of the barrel to get you. That was energy for me. You know why? Because I was out of prison and her son was in prison. I told her, thank God that the barrel had a bottom, but maybe if your son had jumped in the same barrel, he'll be in the same shape. That's enough that God looked beyond my rascalities and gave me another opportunity in his service. I'm standing now on the shoulders of some of those that came before us. But somebody can help me say, if it had not been for the Lord. Moses had a tie tongue problem. I can imagine. He said, you know, I can't speak. The Lord said, but I got somebody as your speaking piece. You have the energy and the power, but I'll use him for your sinner's dictation. He had the power. He had what it took. David had some energy. You remember David transported the ark back to where it was, and when he got it there after an unsuccessful attempt, he did it the Lord's way. He became successful. He got so energized, he started dancing. He got to dancing. He danced all out of his clothes, and even in his own house, his own wife got upset with the energy that he had. David had to remind her of where the Lord had brought us from. Let me go ahead and tell you, there are some folk that will not like our energy. They'll tell us it don't take all that, it don't need to do all that, but when you know God have energized you, you don't mind who see you shout, you don't care who you sit by, you don't mind what you have on, because God was good when you didn't have any, and surely he's good if you have plenty. You ought to go ahead and let him know that you're happy with what he's done, and not only are you happy, but you're glad to be in his service. Just one more time. I'm getting ready to go now. But watch this. David had so much energy that he wanted to build the Lord a house. And you know, some of us say that, you know, the church is here. And some of us ought not say that, because the way we treat one another, the heart is still dirty. But when you have real energy, you don't care what other folks say. David was so happy he had a desire, and Nathan told him it's all right if that's your desire, but God hit Nathan and had him to go back and tell him, no, you won't build it. Save some of that energy. I'm going to give it to your boy. Solomon came on board and he produced the energy and the building. But then I want to close with this. Paul, who messed up plenty times, when he got converted, you'll know that Paul became the Energizer Bunny. And I'm looking at some folk that's been converted in here this morning. And if you know you've been converted, I don't have to ask you to shout. You ought to just shout, because shouting is what you do. And let me go ahead and tell you, when you don't have enough money to shout, you ought to shout on credit. And when you can shout on credit, you understand when your money funny and your change strange and your credit won't get it, because God have given us another opportunity to serve one more time. We ought to get loud. We ought to get cranked up, and the folk outside ought to see our energy. If you have energy, you ought to make some noise right now.